The Chicago Bears figured out the perfect formula to dominate the Philadelphia Eagles with the ground game and also stifle Jalen Hurts and the Eagles' offense.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. On the show today, we're going to go in-depth on how the Bears got the running game going so strongly against the Philadelphia Eagles and some of the different dynamics with DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai, really throwing a lot of different things at this Eagles defense. Also, this Bears defense throwing a lot of different things at the Eagles offense, and a strategy of Dennis Allen's that worked particularly well to disrupt what Jalen Hurts and the Eagles wanted to do in the passing game. And then we'll wrap up looking at the playoff picture where the Bears are the #1 seed in the NFC and what that path looks like towards winning the NFC North and maybe even getting a first-round bye and home field advantage throughout the postseason. But let's start with the Eagles game. And the story of the game, of course, that we talked about on yesterday's podcast, is how well the Bears ran the ball, right? Both running backs over 100 yards, rushing for a total of over 250 yards from their ball carriers, and just dominating Philadelphia's defense. And so I was really curious to go back through in this game and try and figure out, what works so well? We've seen this Eagles defense, not that they're a top run defense in football by any means, but they've not given up 250 rushing yards all season. They'd hardly given up 200 yards all season. They've had games holding opponents under 100 yards rushing. So they certainly have a capability of stopping the run. They certainly have personnel that poses some challenges for opposing offensive lines with, Jordan Davis at nose tackle, Jalen Carter at the other defensive tackle spot. Jalen Phillips is a bigger bodied edge rusher that can set the edge firmly. They still have Brandon Graham coming out of retirement and adding some size up front. And so I was really curious as to what was working for the Chicago Bears. And I think there was a lot of simplicity to it. And then the complexity on top of that makes the simple look less simple, but it remains simple for the offense and not so simple for the defense. Consistently over and over in this game, the Bears were running the same one or two run concepts, right? It was almost all those outside zone stretch runs. Now, each running back, Swift and Monangai, takes a different approach to those runs in terms of what works best for them, and that then makes it less repetitive for the defense to key in on exactly what you're doing. But the offensive line is blocking those up in a lot of the same ways. But what Ben Johnson did such a good job of was putting a lot of window dressing on it and then sort of mixing up the distribution with the running back so that the Eagles couldn't just say, okay, we know what you're going to do. Let's just react in this way because that's how that's supposed to stop that play, because it would always end up looking and feeling a little bit different. So there were a bunch of plays where they would put, Durham Smythe or even Cole Kmet in the backfield in a fullback position and then have them be either a lead blocker that's flowing with the play or a lot of times misdirection running away from the play. And they would bring, a receiver working across the field in motion and then, have the motion going either, again, trying to take you farther outside than the running back would be or take you in the opposite direction. And sometimes you'd have two players rolling left and then the run is going right or vice versa. Or sometimes occasionally he'd pull linemen in one direction and then send other players one direction. And so if you're a linebacker, you're trying to figure out okay, what are they setting up here? Where's the trick play, right? Where's the misdirection? Where's the ball going to go? And for Ben Johnson, he could just sit there and say, nope, give it to Swift, give it to Swift, give it to Swift. give it Monangai, give it to Monangai, give it Monangai, and like always kind of stay in the defense's head. And like, to be fair, he did give it to DJ Moore once and Luther Burden once, and I think there were, a couple of like tricky misdirection-y type plays in there. But like, I think that was 2 out of 40 other passage or rush attempts for the running backs. Like, it's just enough of a threat to know that they could do it. And so the linebackers are looking and the defensive line are looking and trying to figure out where they're supposed to go. And yet most of the time it's just outside zone, a little bit of inside zone. And that was the vast majority of what the Bears ran. It was like 32 zone plays to just like a handful of gap plays, 8 gap plays, gap scheme runs in this game. So it was a lot of the same stuff for the blockers, but a lot different for the defense. And then when you look at like how Swift and Monangai ran those same plays, you see the difference in the backs and the difference, I think, in then how the defense has to defend them. That when you look at just like, say, DeAndre Swift as a runner, we know when he's calling those outside zone runs, right, he likes to bend it towards the sideline as much as possible before making his cuts upfield, or sometimes, cutting all the way back across the formation. But like, if you look at his next gen stats, like his run, they track his exact path on all 18 of his carries. You don't see a lot of extended north-south running from Swift. It's a lot of diagonal lines. A couple of them, he cuts upfield, but for the most part, he's always working horizontally as he's working upfield. And he ends up running for a lot more yards horizontally than he is vertically in terms of like, he rushed for 125 yards vertically, but probably added another 100 horizontally in terms of all the different paths he had to take to find space and create space and use that speed as an advantage. Like, that's not a criticism of DeAndre Swift. It's what works well for him and his skill set. But you compare that to Kyle Monangai and his, run chart, and it's very different, right? Monangai still has a few of those runs where he's trying to get to the outside, but a lot more north-south running, right? And these are with them getting, we can oversimplify it and say essentially the exact same play calls. There was a slight difference, but in all functional purposes, they got almost the exact array of run concepts called for them, mostly in the shotgun, mostly outside zone with a little bit of inside zone. And yet you see Monangai cutting his upfield quickly and getting more north-south more quickly. And as a result, I think you see Monangai has to do a little bit more like physical rumbling as a runner and pushing through contact in some of those ways that Swift did not. But like, Swift had one more of those explosive runs. He had 3 runs of 10 or more yards. Monangai only has 2. Swift has 57 yards on those breakaway plays. Monangai has 48. And that's part of that is a speed thing, right? Swift has the speed to pull away on a couple of those deeper runs, where Monangai just has the one big 30-plus yard run, and then he had another one that would just barely got shy of 20 yards there. But Swift had 3 of those that he can break a little bit farther into the open field. And I just think the defense has to defend these in very different ways, while also recognizing that there's a bunch of motion and misdirection from the offensive coordinator, and but then the offensive line is all moving in the same ways, but then you got to defend the back different based on what the line is doing the same. And it all just becomes a really challenging puzzle for defenses to stop. And then, of course, like, this all maybe overshadows and unintentionally, overlooks how important, like, hey, the offensive line blocked really, really well. Especially, I think, that right side, Jonah Jackson and Darnell Wright just mauling people at the line of scrimmage. I didn't think Ozzie Trapillo was as particularly strong. Again, rookie in his, second start at left tackle. I'm not worried about it per se, but, he still remains the weak link in the running game in addition to the passing game there. But it's also becoming a higher and higher bar there. But you can really see that reflected, like, they got like the charts that track what gap runs end up going through, and like, you'll notice the runs at left tackle and wide left are a lot lower than the runs that go up the middle and off the right guard and off the right side and the right tackle. So I think that kind of is a little bit of your key, that the running backs just weren't seeing as many holes to cut through on that left side of the offensive line. But kudos to this Bears offensive line and to this run scheme and these backs. It was really masterful with all 11 guys working in the same direction. I thought a lot of the Bears' defensive approach to Jalen Hurts and company was pretty masterful from Dennis Allen too, at least in how well it worked. I don't know that it was like overly unique per se, but just like effective, efficient is how I would describe it. And so I want to go in depth on like where the Bears absolutely had Jalen Hurts' number, and there's a really clear delineation between plays he did well and plays he did poorly that played right into the Bears' hands. That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting, because you're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And that live betting is best when the game starts to shift. That receiver's getting hot, the defense tightens up, or momentum flips after turnover, and FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly, player props that update as guys heat up. You can even bet the next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It just keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. The game was moving fast at times for Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles offense in a way that the Bears defense directly caused. And I think there were a few trends that stood out from this game that help explain how they hold the Eagles to 15 points. And, the weather and the wind definitely a factor in there. Missing an extra point and a field goal, obviously 4 points not on the board. Like there are factors beyond just, scheme and creativity from Dennis Allen. But you can see a really key delineation here in the Bears blitzing Jalen Hurts, and when and how, right? It's not just that, all blitzes are a panacea, that, if you just blitz him, he, freezes and makes mistakes all the time. It's not purely that. There is more nuance to it, but the ways Dennis Allen did it proved to be consistently effective in this game. There is a massive, massive split in terms of how Jalen Hurts performed in this game, not only just the versus the blitz and not versus the blitz, but even more specifically within how the Bears blitzed him that was dramatic in this game. Because when they rushed Jalen Hurts with a 4-man rush in this game, which was the majority of his dropbacks, they blitzed him 15 times out of 34 plays. So there were 19 where they didn't blitz him, 15 where they did. About 55 to 45% is the split there. On that 55% of the time, it was just a 4-man rush. He was pretty close to perfect on those throws. And perfect doesn't mean he's slicing and dicing you for 35 yards every time, but he was not missing. You look on those plays with a 4-man rush, I believe he was 14 of 19 or so. No, I think it was 14 of 18. And those misses were spikes, throwaways, and plays where the receivers messed up. He was not really truly inaccurate or making a bad decision on any of the plays where the Bears sent a 4-man rush. He had time in the pocket, and he could sit back, read the defense, and throw an accurate ball to receivers. Again, a couple of those were mistakes there by the receivers, but for the most part, he was dealing from a clean pocket. And so I think as the game went on, Dennis Allen realized that more and more and dialed up the blitz. But I think the most interesting part about Dennis Allen dialing up the blitz here was that it simultaneously worked really well and didn't work in the way you might think it worked. And that's what's kind of fascinating about this, right? When you think about dialing up the blitz, trying to disrupt Jalen Hurts, right? You're thinking pass rushers are coming, they're moving him off his spot, he's under pressure, he's uncomfortable, his mechanics are thrown off, he makes a bad decision and throws the interception down the right sideline. That absolutely was the case on a blitz play. I believe it was Andrew Billings who got free up the middle that pressured Jalen Hurts out of the pocket and forced the interception. But that was much more the exception than the rule in this game. When the Bears blitzed Jalen Hurts 15 times. They got pressure on 5 of those 15 times. 10 of those blitzes, they send an extra pass rusher, and they don't get real pressure on Jalen Hurts. So you would think, well, quarterback's not under pressure, and there are fewer players in coverage than there normally would be. So in theory, quarterback isn't under pressure, has fewer defenders, should then be even more effective, or as effective at least, as he would be with the 4-man rush. But that was not the case in this game. And I think that's the critical factor here, is like the blitz didn't have to get home to disrupt Jalen Hurts. It got in his head, and that's what mattered in this game. Dennis Allen going to a lot of those dime package looks and blitzing with everybody lined up at the line of scrimmage and not sure who's going to come and who's going to go. Blitzing the slot cornerbacks a ton in this game. C.J. Gardner-Johnson sniffing around the line of scrimmage. Kyler Gordon blitzing a ton in this game. In fact, all 15 of the Bears' blitzes were either slot cornerbacks and or linebackers. But the Bears did not blitz a safety a single time in this game, Byard or Brisker. They did not blitz the outside cornerbacks, Jalen Johnson, Nashawn Wright, and I think McLeod played a little bit too, a single time in this game. Every extra pass rusher was one of the 2 slot cornerbacks or one of the 2 linebackers. And it messed with Jalen Hurts. It forced him to speed up, throw the ball quicker, and have a bunch more inaccuracies. And it wasn't any kind of like consistent pattern either, right? He was like, he overthrew a couple times, he underthrew a couple times, he put it too far in front a couple times, he put it behind the receiver a couple times. And I think it especially came in like heightened pressure situations where he's like, oh crap, gotta go, gotta get rid of the ball. And it's interesting, like, it's a small sample size, but like he was 2 for 2 on the throws when the Bears brought a 7-man rush. When you're bringing the house after Jalen Hurts, he was like, snap, quick throw, get rid of it, done, completed those passes. But when it's a 5 or a 6-man rush, the accuracy tanked. So I think sometimes the blitz is coming and he feels like he's got that extra second to try and make a play, and then rushes it and forces something because he's like, I waited an extra second, the internal clock's speeding up, now I got to make a play. I don't have the exact explanation as to why it worked out that way, but you can kind of talk yourself into a few reasons as to why. Yeah, the 5 and the 6-man rush were really, really effective, but the 7-man rush, he just knew he had to throw hot and get rid of it right away. On those other plays, he's like, no, we can pick this up and I can try and make something happen, and that's when he ends up trying to do a little bit too much. And don't get me wrong, they didn't shut down everything Hurts wanted to do. I mean, we talked about how perfect he was from a clean pocket, and A.J. Brown has 100 yards and a touchdown in there, and they were just kind of hitting the same play over and over with A.J. Brown for the most part. It was a taste of Ben Johnson's own medicine, right? Those deep in-cutting routes, 15 to 20 yards downfield. Like you look at Jalen Hurts' passing chart, and you can see a bunch of those completed green dots that are about deeper than 10 yards, but shorter than 20 yards over the rough, like, middle of the field. It's like 4 different deep in-cutting routes to A.J. Brown, where he's far away behind the linebackers, but in front of the safeties, and just layering it in there 3 or 4 times for some nice chunk plays, and then 2 vertical balls on the left sideline, 1 touchdown beating Nashawn Wright, another was a deeper ball that beat Nashawn Wright. It was like a 15-yarder and a 28-yarder. Like, okay, yeah, A.J. Brown getting some chunk plays in there, but the rest of the time, you're getting Hurts uncomfortable, and then when you do get him under pressure, he absolutely made mistakes and threw the interception when he's under pressure in that play, and then, of course, you load up and stop the run against Saquon Barkley, you strip the ball out on a tush push, and that's how you get a really dominant defensive performance all around there. Because, like, generally, the Bears' pass rush, like, wasn't beating blockers very much. You didn't see this Eagles offensive line losing their one-on-one blocks. Like, yeah, okay, the guards give up some interior pressure. Javon Dexter had a couple. Billings had the one we talked about. But, like, a lot of the pressure the Bears did get on Hurts, which wasn't that much, it's coming late in the play where it's like, okay, or Hurts is leaving a clean pocket, but the offensive line hasn't actually lost. It was 8 pressures, so it's a small sample size, but it was like blitzer comes in unblocked, or Hurts leaves a clean pocket, and then Sweat's able to pressure him out in open space, or occasionally you got some interior pressure, but like I'm not seeing this Bears pass rush actually get better. It's just like the blitzing and the timing and the effectiveness of the blitzing by Dennis Allen is what's getting these quarterbacks uncomfortable. And he deserves a bunch of credit for being able to generate that himself. and get this Bears team into first place, not only in the NFC North, but in the entire NFC playoff picture. The number one seed currently belongs to the Chicago Bears. I don't think most of us expect them to truly hold on to that for the final 5 games of the season, but I want to take a look at like what that path looks like and what kind of things we should be watching for in the coming weeks from the Rams, the Seahawks, the Buccaneers, and of course, the rest of the NFC North. That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. Because it's not just something that you wrap, it's a way to share memories. Because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it, so when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. It's perfect for grandparents or anyone who's got young children in their family, because I know like with my young niece, she changes every time I see her. And it'd be great if my brother could just upload pictures every week when she's going to school and getting bigger every day. You can keep up with all of life's changes. And with endless uploads of pictures and 30-second videos all coming through the Aura app, you can even put a personalized message right inside the frame so the gift feels thoughtful the moment it's opened. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named number 1 by Wirecutter, by using our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's AURA. auraframes.com, promo code locked on. This deal is exclusive to our listeners, and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support this show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. So after an impressive win over the Philadelphia Eagles, the Chicago Bears sit as somehow, someway, the number 1 seed in the NFC playoff picture. Not something we really thought was possible this season. And as a result, I think our best approach is to say, hey, enjoy it while we're here. I didn't expect to be here, so enjoy it. But I don't think anybody's going to get too entitled and feel like, oh yeah, the Bears are clearly the best team in the NFC that every team should be afraid of. They're a good team for sure. But we've seen the Bears play some of these games close. We've seen their ups and downs, but we've seen every team in the NFC's ups and downs. And that's what keeps Chicago right here in this mix. Obviously just beating the Philadelphia Eagles, who are now the 3 seed, but we just saw the Los Angeles Rams lose to the Carolina Panthers, which gave the Bears the 1 seed. The Bears have a tiebreaker over the Los Angeles Rams because of their conference win percentage, their win percentage in the NFC. We've seen the Buccaneers fall off a little bit in recent weeks with injuries, but then you got, the Seahawks are tough, but Sam Darnold is liable to implode at any time. The Green Bay Packers, well, we know them. And then the San Francisco 49ers are super banged up, but somehow, 9-4, which is only good for the 7th seed in the NFC right now, which just kind of feels wrong too. But I want to use this opportunity to kind of look at okay, what does the path look like for the Chicago Bears? Obviously, when you're the number 1 overall seed, if you win every game for the rest of the year and finish, what would that be, 14-3, you're going to keep the number 1 seed. The Bears do literally control their destiny in terms of if you win out, it's yours. You've got it. I don't think it's realistic to expect the Bears to completely win out. They've got Packers, Browns, Packers, 49ers, Lions, the last 5 games of the season. I think we can all sit here and say, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if you lose one of the 2 Packers games. Are you going to sweep Green Bay this year? You hope so. But we can be realistic and say probably not. And then the 49ers at 9-4, we'll see how healthy they are in week 17. But that's a playoff team right now. That's going to be a tough game. Not an instant L that we're penciling in, but that one will be tough. And, the Lions in week 18 are always going to be a tough game. But I wonder if that week 18 game against the Lions even will end up mattering that much. I think for the Bears, this all comes down to those 2 games against the Green Bay Packers, because you're going to beat the Cleveland Browns in between. That's a foregone conclusion. And if you beat if you win at least one of those Green Bay Packers games, and ideally both, of course, but at least one of those Packers games, you should be in the driver's seat for the NFC North. If that gives you another full game ahead of the Green Bay Packers with 5 games left to play, that should be too much to overcome. The Packers play at the Denver Broncos, which will be a very difficult game. They also get a home game against the Ravens, who will be desperate for every win they can get to get in the playoffs. And they finish with the Vikings, and okay, that might be a win for them. But like the Bears playoffs and really the NFC North is going to come down to these 2 Green Bay Packers games. And it starts with this first one at Lambeau Field. Because like I look at like the Rams and their path from here, like because they just lost to the Panthers, it's hard to trust how good they're going to be. If they got Cardinals, Lions, Seahawks, Falcons, Cardinals, they could win all 5 of those games. They could lose to the Seahawks and the Cardinals in there. They could even potentially lose to the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, I know the Falcons are struggling a little bit in there as well, but like they've got difficult in-division games. And if the Lions start figuring some things out, they absolutely could be a team that could be a sneaky win against the Los Angeles Rams. The Bears have to play those same Lions too, so it's sort of like a double-edged sword there. You want them to be good enough to beat the Rams, but not good enough to give you too much trouble in Week 18. But if you've already got the division locked up by Week 18, then maybe that that Lions game doesn't matter as much. And the Rams will be busy trying to hold off the Seattle Seahawks, who again are a little bit more of I would say a volatile team, given we've seen Sam Darnold do, but they have a good team around him, and if he doesn't crap the bed like he did against the Rams a couple weeks ago, they might be the biggest threat to the Bears' number 1 seed because they got Falcons, Colts, Rams, Panthers, 49ers. I mean, that's not an easy path by any means, but they've maybe been one of the more consistent teams in recent weeks, but they haven't played a lot of good teams either. Like, this is as wide open for the Bears to hold on to this as possible because the Eagles are flailing, the Rams are flailing, the Seahawks are, again, probably number 1 threat there, the Seahawks or Packers. Like, that's again what it comes down to. This is a control your own destiny type of stretch for the Bears. You cannot oversell how important these 2 Green Bay Packers games are. Like, every Green Bay Packers game is important. They're always the 2 most important games of the season. And somehow, like, these are the most important in over a decade, these 2 games. You have to win one for sure. If you win both, you are locking in the NFC North and maybe locking in the NFC playoff picture, because if you beat the Packers both times and you're beating the Browns in between, that puts you at 12 wins with the 49ers and the Seahawks, or excuse me, 49ers and the Lions as your last 2 games. You would be then counting on like the Seahawks and the Rams would have to not be going undefeated over their final games. Like, yeah, I think it's pretty likely that both of those teams add some more losses over these next 5 games they play each other, so one of them has to lose at least once, and then you've got the Rams with the Lions, the Falcons, and the Cardinals in there. You've got the Seahawks with the Colts, a first-place team, the Panthers, who just beat the Rams, and the 49ers, who are a darn good team, too. So, like, it's a real possibility here, but you got to beat Green Bay at least once, preferably twice. And, like, that's when I will truly buy in and believe in the Bears as a number 1 seed. Like, they got to get through that first. And like, it's definitely a monkey off their back that we need to see from a rivalry standpoint. Yes, Caleb beat the Packers in Lambeau last season in Week 18. I'm not one who's going to give you all the Packers excuses as to why they lost that game, but like a very different situation now. And so I want to see it. The Bears team that played in Philadelphia and whooped Philadelphia's butt will absolutely be able to whoop Green Bay's butt in Green Bay if they play that well. And if the Bears continue to trend in this positive direction and maybe get some healthier linebackers this week, as things seem to be trending in that direction, right? And staying healthy in the secondary, like, this is boding well for a Bears victory over the Packers. But there is still a little bit of that, like, things go wrong in Lambeau, Green Bay's got your number kind of energy that I need to see Ben Johnson, like, expel from this Bears locker room. Maybe it left with Matt Eberflus last season, but we'll have plenty of time this week to get you ready for that Bears-Packers matchup right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you're looking for a second listen today, be sure to go check out the Locked On NFL podcast for more football talk, because I co-host the Tuesday morning Locked On NFL podcast with Tyler Rowland. We talked about teams in the playoffs that are maybe on their way out, teams that are collapsing a little bit, like the Detroit Lions that we talked about, like the Philadelphia Eagles that we just saw the Bears beat. We also talked about teams that are maybe potentially sneaking into the playoffs that had been struggling but are playing their best football right now, like the Dallas Cowboys, like the potential of the Carolina Panthers, and of course some teams in the AFC as well. So go check out Locked On NFL for your second listen today. Coming back tomorrow, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.